On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, the future started yesterday.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, July the 9th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the Hell website at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can join us over in the Locked On Raptors Discord server where the sickos are out. Last night, someone posted, quote unquote, "Whoa, Bryce Sensabaugh, low-key nice." Yeah, we're into the real summer hours on the Locked On Raptors Discord. Come and join the sickos just like you, and you can be part of our growing listener community. Link in the description of the podcast. Free to join, as always. Of course, you can find the show for free where you get your podcast on the audio side of things. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. All that good stuff. Much appreciated when you support the show on the audio side of things. You can also go to YouTube and subscribe to the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel. When you do that, also hit the notification bell button. You will get a push notification to your device every single time the show is about to premiere or go live, so you never miss a second of that sweet Locked On Raptors action. Today's Locked On Raptors action is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, let's get rolling here. Joined today by Louis Zatzman from Raptors Republic to take stock of a big blustery press conference yesterday with Immanuel Quickley and Scottie Barnes being announced with their new deals with the team, all sorts of, allusions to the future beginning now and all of that good stuff. And also some allusions to the roster building being done. Really? We're going to get into all that today with Louis, who is here. Lovely to have him back on the show. Louis, how the hell are you, pal?
Hey, man, the sickos are out. I'm ready to be here.
You know what? I can understand watching Vegas Summer League. All the teams are there, but like the first week of July, you're choosing to, instead of going out and enjoying the summer, watch Utah Summer League. I don't know, man. Seek help. Touch grass. We love all the sickos. The sickos are what make the podcast world go around, of course. But please stop posting about Bryce Sensabaugh on my timeline. All right. Let's get into it, Louis. We were going to talk today about, the Raptors, whether or not they're actually done roster building, as it seemed like they pretty much declared yesterday via Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, et cetera, et cetera. We've got, of course, a look at next season and how good or not good the Raptors figure to want to be. But off the top, we have to talk about Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley being introduced. It was already kind of informally official that they were going to be the guys this thing was built around, but it definitely felt like they put the stamp down yesterday. This is the Scottie and IQ era, and it begins now. What were your overall impressions of the presser yesterday from the Globe and Mail Center high above the Toronto skyline? Not using OVO, not using the arena, fresh locations, all that stuff. It's all brand new here, Louis. Overall thoughts and sort of level of belief in the bet the Raptors are clearly making here on Scottie Barnes and Immanuel Quickley being the duo to lead them into the future.
Yeah, I was surprised it wasn't Hotel X. That would have been my bet for location. But so it's clear that they are happy with their team, right? Masai was really like the one word I would have used to describe the mood was jubilant.
Sure.
Like this is the team that they want. Masai even went so far as to say he hasn't been happy for a long time in declaring that, himself happy now. That's always risky, right? To be like, now is the first time I'm happy. That will never backfire. But my level of confidence is not to the same extent as Masai Ujiri. We'll probably get into that. But yeah, this is clearly the team that Masai wants, that Bobby wants, and they are very pleased with how their summer went.
Yeah, I think I'm probably a little bit more on the side of, the Scottie IQ of it all. I think that's a perfectly fine bet to make. I think Scottie Barnes is excellent. I think, as Immanuel Quickley noted yesterday, it's rare to find a guy who has that sort of star juice, who plays both ends of the floor. the creation he brings to the table, the multi-positional defense that in theory he can bring. I think that's got to come a long way still. As much as he really found himself as a help defender and a rim protector, there's still a lot of on-ball stuff to clean up. And we all know the story with his defense at this point. But Scottie Barnes, I think there's just like no doubt that the rookie max extension, totally fair value for him. And he stands a very good chance of exceeding that value over the course of the life of the deal once it kicks in following this coming season. With Immanuel Quickley, I think it's maybe a little bit more sort of divided among the fan base as to how much belief there is. Listener of this podcast know I am very bullish on Immanuel Quickley. I think he's a really smart bet. I have no problem with the contract whatsoever. Interesting nugget yesterday that was sort of released out there that it's going to be a flat $35 million a year for the next 5 seasons. So that might feel a little heavy in year one, but every single year it's going to become a lesser part of the salary cap pie that the Raptors are splitting up. And by the end of that deal, he'll be making 17% of the salary cap. That feels like it has the potential to age exceptionally well if things go to plan here with Quickley. And again, I am very much on the side of, yes, I understand the issues with getting to the rim and picking up the dribble too early, although he very much worked on that down the stretch. The defense, obviously, at the point of attack needs to be a little bit better than it's been, although I think you can get by with a lead guard defender who's maybe not the greatest defender alive. I think we've seen that work just fine for a lot of teams if there's proper insulation behind him. And we'll get into my concerns about the insulation behind him. But I think for me, Louis, the thing that really has me feeling confident in Quickley sort of making good on this deal and probably exceeding the value of the deal, he just seems to have the feel of being a lead guard down, and he had it down pretty quickly in a very difficult team context. I just think the sort of finger on the pulse stuff that you look for from a point guard, it's hard to quantify. The numbers wouldn't suggest it's really there. He didn't drive winning when he was on the floor or anything like that. But watching him just sort of get command of the team and settle in as a playmaker, as a guy who can set the table for others, and also be a guy whose value is not entirely tied to being on the ball. He's someone who can wreak havoc away from the ball as well, which is maybe not so common for lead guard types in the NBA these days. I think Quickley stands a chance of more than exceeding the value of that contract. Like he's going to make it look like a bargain as it progresses, maybe not so much in year one, but again, you're paying for future performance, and 5 years is a long time and a lot of runway for development. Where do you come down as being a little bit less sort of bullish on that bet? What is it that gives you pause about Quickley, about Barnes, about the combination of the two? The floor is yours.
I think you want your lead guard to be able to drive elite offense basically no matter who else is on the court, as long as they're NBA guys, Sure. I'm not saying for Malik Williams, but and I'm not sure Quickley will be able to do that.
Okay.
At any point in his career is the thing. Like he certainly can't now. He couldn't last year. And I love what he brings as an additive measure. I think he's a really nice complementary player to Scottie. I would prefer to see Quickley handling Scottie screening be a little better. But at that point, when you're nitpicking, that you're talking about specific play types, that's small, right?
Sure.
He's a shooter, he's a mover, he's a screener. That's all nice for what Scottie brings. But when you look at, 2-star teams, which is what the Raptors sort of are betting on being at this point, both stars can hold up their end of the bargain without the other on the floor.
Right.
Scottie will be able to drive winning basketball without Quickley on the floor. I'm not sure Quickley can do the same, right? Kyle Lowry was able to do that when Kawhi Leonard sat, or when DeMar DeRozan sat, or when Pascal Siakam sat, right, in 2020-21. Steph was able to drive winning offense when Clay and Draymond and Kevin Durant all sat. It's championship teams. Jamal Murray was able to cook when Jokic sat. Championship teams have that in their second best star. And I just don't know if Quickley, given some of the issues you mentioned, he doesn't create layups for himself really or for others. Defensively, you need to scheme around him. I don't know. I see him probably as the third, maybe the fourth best player on a championship team. I don't think the second.
I think that's fair. I think I do really buy into the concept of sort of point guards taking maybe a little longer to figure things out. And I do think, especially with Quickley, right? Like his first 3.5 seasons were, all right, you're a bench gunner, go do bench gunner things. Yeah. And, the few fleeting glimpses we got of him kind of running the show with the Knicks, pretty encouraging returns. And I think I just don't know if any of the sort of winning basketball stuff from last year can be taken into account because, like you said, he was not playing with 4 NBA players a lot of the time. Or if he was playing with 4 eighth men and guys who, a serious team isn't going to be rolling out there for serious minutes in high leverage games. I think Quickley's ability to, just sort of the pull-up shooting is kind of where it begins for me, right? Like I am so high on pull-up shooting being the sort of skill that unspools opposing defenses. And I think he brings that as well as anybody else. And I think as the progression goes, as the development goes, as he gets more time and reps, I think that skill is going to open up all the other stuff for him eventually. He's finished at the rim just fine last year, 71% at the rim. I think if he can uptick that sort of volume a little bit in a better team context with better spacing, playing with Jakob Poeltl in particular, where that pick and roll combination really bore a lot of fruit. I think there is something there, especially, as we mentioned, the Scottie Barnes thing, the sort of leveling up of that tandem and their chemistry, that's going to unlock a lot of things for Quickley as well. And I do think Barnes is going to have a lot of agency over the development of Quickley as this contract goes along. That said, maybe he is not the second best player on this team. I think the contract he's earning in what the landscape is going to be going forward will give them the ability to find a second guy if they need to, right? And I think like RJ Barrett probably becomes the pivot point there. If you want to find an upgrade on the wing, maybe Barrett becomes a guy you put into a trade to go and do that. Maybe a guy appears in the draft next season. Maybe they're bad, they get some lottery luck, and Ace Bailey becomes your number 2 guy, or whomever you want to look at in next year's draft. I don't think that as much as they're giving a lot of runway and a lot of responsibility to Quickley, I don't think it necessarily means that he has to be the second best player on this team for them to find success over the course of the next 5 years. But I do think he's good enough and talented enough to give him a couple years to sort of figure out, hey, maybe he is. Maybe we don't need to go and pursue that clear second star. Let's give Quickley the runway here to figure out if that is what he is. And maybe it works out. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe my bullishness will be proven wrong. But I just believe a lot in the sort of slow burn development guys, development from point guards. I guess if, I don't know if you have any sort of rebuttal to that.
No, I think we're actually sort of moving closer and closer to the same argument about it. And his assists almost tripled, right? Like he had a bunch of, mid-teen assist games when he was playing with Toronto's top talent last year. The pull-up shooting, which I love, we got to see a lot more of it. He only took 3 a game, I think.
Sure.
Shot at 37%, which is amazing for a pull-up 3. If he can take 5 or 6, which is near the top of the league, I think it's Doncic took like 8. And then after that, the leaders were 6 and 6-ish, right? Trae Young, Steph Curry, Donovan Mitchell. If he can get up there, I think that would mean a lot for Toronto's offense. And the pull-up 3 thing is you want it to be a means of opening other space. Like that's what I just wanted to dig in. What you said is pull-up 3s are big for opening up the rest of the offense. Fred VanVleet had to take a bunch of pull-up 3s. He was among the leaders in frequency, despite being average or slightly below average.
Sure.
Because he wasn't great at driving, at isolating, if Quickley can use his pull-up 3s, and he's much better at them than Fred was, to do more than just as a counter to his inability to score in isolation, to actually as a weapon to open up his own driving, to open up isolation, to open up his rollers, that's when you're really cooking with gas. So I think that pull-up 3 frequency number is the one I'm watching next season for. Is Quickley really growing into the role? Is it going to be a slow burn? And I loved what you mentioned about RJ Barrett. I mean, he's been so good. I don't want to talk about trading him just because he's been so awesome as a Raptor and so happy as a Raptor. That being said, trading happy Raptors is sort of a thing that this
they have like a weird like fetish for doing that.
And RJ Barrett sort of could redeem his value and perception around the league to the point that he may well become something like a DeMar DeRozan player, and perhaps trade. Who knows? That's way in the future. But for now, you're absolutely right that Quickley doesn't have to be the second best player, and he doesn't have to be the second leading scorer. I imagine RJ Barrett will probably score more points than Quickley this year. So, we'd be remiss to discuss what the team looks like without mentioning Barrett, who's been phenomenal.
For sure. Absolutely. Quickley might be the fourth leading scorer behind my Prince Jonathan Mobo, of course. I'm on the S train. You can listen to that podcast from last week where S and I went off on how good we think Mobo is in fact going to be. We're going to come back on the other side here, Lewis. We ran long there. We're going to get into, speaking of, things we're watching next year. Are we really going to be watching a roster that has no threes and like 1-5 and a whole lot of question marks and 19,000 shooting guards? Yeah, it seems like we will. We're going to get into that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. And look, sometimes you just got to have someone to talk to, right? It can be challenging. You're in the summertime. There's a million things going on. You want to try to make decisions that are lining up with the things that you believe and value. And it's nice to have someone to just throw things off of, get the stuff out of your head that you need to get out there and into the world. And a therapist can help you make the decisions that are in line with your values, whether it's something small, the work decision, a life choice, whatever it is, or some big stuff. Maybe you're dealing with some major trauma or a massive change in your day-to-day. It's all there for you to be explored and improved upon with therapy, and BetterHelp can be the place for you to go and do that. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Back at it here with Louis Zatzman from Raptors Republic as we take stock of the presser from yesterday with the Toronto Raptors, Scottie Barnes, Immanuel Quickley, the whole 9 yards, and announcing the future. A part of that was a suggestion that the Raptors are maybe kind of done with roster building. And of course, for all of those who have been, anxiously waiting here in Bruce Brown trade purgatory, maybe a bit of a surprising thing, but maybe also not surprising considering the Raptors have, gone into seasons recently with roster imbalances and not really seem to have much of a worry about it. We talked last week about the sort of overwhelming number of shooting guards and shooting guard type players and shooting guard sized players on this roster, the lack of a backup center behind Jakob Poeltl to really provide insulation in the event he gets hurt, the lack of a true wing stopping type guy to throw out to the opposing team's best players on defense. This is a weird roster, and it does not seem like it's going to change much based on the words from the Raptors brass on Monday. Of course, things can change, and, they lie all the time at these things. Last year, Jeff Doughton Jr. and Delano Banton were sitting front row at the Darko Rajakovic press conference being touted as big parts of the future. Obviously, things can change, but what was your initial impression, reaction, response to the idea that the Raptors are in fact done with major roster moves until the season? It kind of caught me a little bit off guard and frankly left me feeling a little bit disappointed because I simply just want to watch a normal roster play normal basketball, Lewis. Is that too much to ask?
I wasn't surprised. This is what I assumed the team would be. And I think rather than thinking about the team in terms of positions, if you think about it in terms of roles, then they will be a normal team playing normal basketball. Because yes, they have gone into seasons unbalanced before. Famously, they were a team without a center or a backup point guard for a long, long time. And that was bizarre because they needed what a center did. They needed someone to finish easy baskets around the rim, to set screens, to rebound, to protect the rim. Well, they have that this year, right? And there's not a lot of roles that they're missing. They have initiators. They have screen setters and finishers to go along with the initiators. They have secondary drivers. They have orbiting shooter. They have point of attack defenders, and they might be missing like a big wing defender. But I think the hope is that Mobo grows into that pretty quickly. And I don't know if you want to sign a guy like, well, I know he's already been signed, but a Taurean Prince, for example, when I'd rather those minutes just go to Mobo in the first case. And if he can't handle it, then you can just solve the problem at that point. But yeah, I think they have what they want. I do think that there was a little meat left on the free agent bone with how they ran the summer. If they had declined Bruce Brown's option, that maybe they could have been the team instead of the Spurs who facilitated the DeRozan trade and got a pick swap out of it in 2039, 2054, 2100, whatever.
And Harrison Barnes, who I think would notably be like a perfect
Harrison
fit
Barnes
on this roster.
There was stuff they could have taken from the summer beyond what they did. But I think Bruce Brown, in 2021, 2022, I actually thought he would be a really nice fit on the team. Maybe not at this, salary amount, maybe not after the half season he just had with the team, but I believe his value will rehabilitate if he comes back to the team. Maybe they can trade him at the trade deadline. If not, he's fine. He's a nice veteran to have on the team who can do a bunch of cool stuff. And it's always good to have solid structural foundation in place to help rookies and sophomores grow. Like, he will help Grady. He will help Walter. He will help Mobo just by virtue of setting screens and passing and driving and doing normal NBA rotation caliber stuff. I would have liked to have seen Chris Boucher get traded because other teams could use him, but they're not going to do that without it being in their interest. They don't want to trade Boucher and attach a second to get rid of him.
Sure.
And no one is offering anything to get Boucher. That sucks, but it's fine, right? This is the team that they want. I don't think any tinkering is going to change that. And sure, they could have done a little more cap absorption this summer, but it's not like Bruce Brown is Goran Dragic. And so it's fine.
Yeah, look, I have been pretty staunchly pounding the drum that the sort of discourse on Bruce Brown went way too beyond the pale over the course of the back half of the season. There were very clear reasons why he wasn't having very much impact on that Raptors team, which was not really a basketball team by the end. The last month and a half was a disaster show. It was garbage time. And there's a reason cleaning the glass takes out garbage time when they account for stats. It's not useful or informative or representative really in any way. And I think Bruce Brown has always been the type of player who's going to excel when playing with better players. All of the better players were not available down the stretch. So, and also there's the knee thing he was dealing with. I'm more than all right to give a pass to Bruce Brown for the lack of performance down the stretch. I think where my issue comes in is the roster balance thing. And maybe I'm a bit more worried about it than you. I think the lack of a wing defender type. I like Mobo. I also think Mobo is going to be asked to play backup center sometimes, maybe a lot, especially if Jakob Poeltl gets hurt. He's going to have to fill a bunch of holes, and he's a second-round pick. And as much as I am banging the drum that Jonathan Mobo is going to be a fantastic player down the line, and I'm so in on basically everything he brings to the table, that's a lot to ask of a second-round rookie in year one. I just think it's kind of untenable for the idea of playing cohesive, developmentally conducive basketball. I don't care at all right now about the win total for next season. I just want to see them play competent basketball that is getting guys into the sort of flow and the sort of repetitions and the situations where they are going to succeed down the line. And I think the lack of of sort of wing depth on this team, the lack of center depth on this team poses a real risk to them being able to do that. If Jakob Poeltl goes down, I think they're in serious trouble. It's going to be quite rudderless. If they can't get a step up from RJ Barrett in terms of his point of attack defense, if Scottie Barnes remains the troublesome on-ball defender that he's been throughout his career, I think it's going to be really hard for them to have any kind of structure on defense, period. And I think that there's just like a decay to that type of stuff. When your roster is not set up for the guys to succeed and sort of be in positions to do the things they do well, I think that has like an overall sort of limiting factor on how much guys can actually take strides in their development. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is too sort of wishy-washy and unquantifiable, but it's just a vibes thing. It's a sort of eye test thing. It's a human nature thing. If you're playing loser basketball for 6 months, you're going to develop loser tendencies. And I just think the roster as it's set up right now, maybe not the most conducive to playing non-loser basketball, even if they might lose a lot of games because of the strength of the league and their lack of overall high-end talent. I still want to see them playing competitive and competent basketball. And I think while they can do that with their starters, I think a couple of key pieces go down for any stretch of time and things get really, really challenging. And that's where I would have loved to see Bruce Brown and his salary slot turned into a Caleb Martin, turned into a Harrison Barnes in that pick swap thing from the Kings. Like, there are ways to make this roster less full of guys who are 6'5" and below. And I don't think they took those avenues. And I think they could get burned for it. Let me ask you, just like straight up, either or. Would you prefer Bruce Brown on this team next season or Harrison Barnes and that pick swap from the Kings, just in a vacuum?
Oh, well, I'd prefer the pick swap, obviously.
Right.
But if it's just the players, I think Bruce Brown is a better player and will help the team more. But I actually don't disagree with you, but I think that's in Toronto's favor. So they are set up to be a competent, well-established team as long as they're healthy.
Yeah.
As long as Jakob Poeltl is healthy, they're going to play solid basketball. And Yak is set up to play, 34 minutes a game? That leaves 14 minutes at backup center. I think you're fine with Kelly Olynyk playing some center, not against starters, against bench teams. I think they want some minutes for Scottie Barnes to play backup center. And then, maybe Mobo can get thrown in here and there, but you want a little time to experiment at center, right? Maybe Barnes will be a center that's very successful when he's not surrounded by forwards, when he's surrounded by shooting, by movement shooting. They want to find that out. Quickley and Dick and Walter, if they're on the floor when Scottie's at center, I want to see what that looks like. But as you very correctly point out, if any piece of that goes down, the entire house falls down. Without Jakob at center, you have 48 minutes of Olynyk. Well, we just saw what that looked like. Or Barnes, that's incredibly taxing and dangerous, and we don't want that. Or Mobo, and he's not ready for that. That seems like a good thing, that the Raptors are susceptible to a long string of losses with an easy, deft front office touch at any point. No?
Let's pick up that thread on the other side, because I think that's interesting, and I think we might sort of disagree a little bit on the sort of sanctity of the game. Damn it. We're going to talk about the spirit of competition coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in North America. And look, yes, your classic team sports have wound down, your classic men's team sports at least, but that does not mean there's not a million things going on this summer for you to throw some money down on if you so please. Of course, the WNBA season's going strong. Maybe you want to get on that Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese Rookie of the Year race, and you want to put some money down on who you think is going to win. That is available to you. Of course, you've got the Copa America, Canada tonight against Argentina. Vast underdogs, probably going to lose, but you put a little money on Canada to win. And if they win, you're not only thrilled that they've moved on to the final of the Copa America somehow, but you've also got a whole bunch of scratch filling up your account because they beat Argentina against the odds. Of course, it's not just that. You got the Olympics coming up. You've got baseball rolling all the way. You've got futures for the next seasons for the NFL, the NHL, and NBA, of course, and it's all on FanDuel. And all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the Locked On Podcast Network. Closing it out here with Louis Zatzman from Raptors Republic. Just a reminder, Locked On Sports Today 24/7 is your all-day streaming channel over on the Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel. You just go there, you subscribe, and it's running all day, 24/7. Locked On shows covering all the biggest stories in sports from the local and national perspectives. It's a great thing to put on so you can procrastinate doing work. Go do it. All right, let's continue on here. Louis, we'll pick up the thread that you sort of laid down before about, would it actually be kind of good if some injuries befall the Raptors and they lose a whole whack of games at some stretch of the season? I, as the sort of resident anti-tanker of Raptors internet, have some problems with that, Louis. Now, look, they're going to go into this season. The NBA sort of landscape right now suggests that the Raptors are probably going to be one of the bottom 12 teams in the league at the very least. Do they squeak into a play-in? I think that's possible with how bad the bottom of the East is going to be. I think the Bulls are going to be miserable. The Nets are going to suck. The Hawks, jury's still out, but there's a lot riding on some guys who I don't really believe a whole lot in over in Atlanta. We know the Hornets, if they're healthy, great. But when are the Hornets ever healthy? You've got the Pistons, you've got the Wizards, all on down the dregs of the Eastern Conference. The Raptors are going to be somewhere in that sort of fringe play-in conversation, much like they were for a long stretch of last season, I would say. I don't know, with the way the league is set up, with the flattened lottery odds, if the Raptors need to go and worry about losing a whole whack of games and trying to engineer this thing. They might just be not very good on their own. And if they are pretty good, I think that's something that you should be okay letting ride a little bit, because I think that probably suggests that there is something with this core that's worth further investing in going forward. It's not to say that you could never use extra talent in the draft. Everyone could use extra talent in the draft, but if you're not getting into the top 4 of the draft, I don't know if that's some kind of disaster if this team shows they're on some sort of positive trajectory with their play this year. I guess, what's your view on how good they want to be next season? You wrote a big piece earlier about how it might be better for the Raptors if they're not good this season. I think, you let them play, and if their play suggests that something good is brewing, then you just kind of ride with it and you're happy, and maybe you start to look at ways to further invest in it. But your sort of general thoughts on how good they should want to be this year, how good you think they want to be this year, that don't seem like they want to go and outright shamelessly tank like they're the Wizards or the Blazers or the Jazz if they trade Lauri Markkanen. But it doesn't seem like they're all that upset if they're, based on the roster construction and their sort of decisions in the offseason. It doesn't seem like they're all that upset if they don't make the play-in either. How do you sort of evaluate all of that within the context of, sort of where they sit with the sort of core they have in-house and all of that?
This goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the podcast. Let's say all their dreams come true. Scottie Barnes becomes a top 5, top 10 player, just, amazing in every area. Like, that's all foreseeable. Immanuel Quickley becomes right on that verge of all-star, maybe sub-all-star level. The shooting pops even further. He's taken a ton, all of that good stuff. Grady Dick and Walter are really, really strong movement shooters and running around the court. They add some weight so that defensively their instincts are combined with actual abilities to hold their ground when they beat players to spots. All that stuff happens. Mobo, a big wing mover. They're still not a championship team.
No.
They're good. They're a very good team, right? They're not that close. You still need another star, even if everything else gets true. There's 2 ways to get a star for the Raptors. There's 3 for other teams. There's 2 for the Raptors. You draft one or you trade for one. And as we said, maybe you can trade for one, but the Raptors just don't have the talent base right now where they can trade for a star and be fine. And particularly with the cap being what it is, when the Raptors traded for Kawhi Leonard, they had Pascal Siakam on a rookie contract. Kyle Lowry getting paid way below what he deserved. They had DeMar DeRozan as an unbelievable, reputation guy who's so successful in so many areas. And then they had all of these young and improving players, OG Anunoby, Norman Powell, DeLon Wright, Fred VanVleet. They don't have that anymore for this team. Maybe over 3-4 years, they can slowly build the talent base, develop their rookies, sign, get them. When the 905 are winning championships again, that's when they have that ready to go once again.
A process that feels like they're hoping to start with the moves they made this summer at the draft, right?
Big time.
Like getting 4
and the summer
new guys
team,
in. Yeah.
Right? Summer league team looks great this year. So, yes, they're starting. Or you just draft one this year. Right? Those are the 2 ways. This year's draft looks phenomenal. The Raptors have their pick this year. There's a lot of possible stars.
Most of them are shooting guards, I'll note, and it drives me insane. But yes, most of them are shooting guards.
Which would be great. The Raptors need, that's fine. I think Cooper Flagg would fit perfectly. Dylan Harper would fit perfectly.
Sure.
Ace Bailey would fit perfectly. Edgecombe. There's a lot of guys who, I'm not a scout. I don't know who is most likely to become a star. But there's a lot of guys that if the Raptors happen to end up with the top pick, could really make the process from a 3-year process to a 1-year process. And that's if everything goes right. If things don't go right, maybe Immanuel Quickley is who he is at this point. He's a lot of minutes in the NBA. Maybe Scottie Barnes' jumper never comes around. These are all possible things, right? It's not stuff that fans want to talk about, but front offices definitely have to. These are all possibilities. And if that happens, then the Raptors are going to be okay for quite a time, right? They're sort of locked into being okay. I think this year, being a bottom 5, bottom 10 team makes the worst possible scenario a whole lot better, the best possible scenario a whole lot better. It just makes things a lot easier. I'm not saying you rest Scottie Barnes from day one. Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. That's insane. I agree. You want players to get winning habits. You want to try to win games. But if Scottie Barnes tweaks an ankle, I don't think you want him to play on it, right? If Jakob Poeltl has bumps and bruises, it's okay if he sits a week. Like, I think there's a balance between tanking and, we're fighting for every last minute. Nick Nurse was fighting for every minute. The Oklahoma City Thunder 2 years ago were putridly tanking. The Raptors need to find somewhere in the middle where they can play for the present and for the future.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think maybe my concern comes from how bad I think the real tankers are going to be and how many of them are all of a sudden. Like, there's a lot of teams that are going to try to suck this year. And to be at the level of suck, to guarantee yourself a top 5 pick or something like that, it's going to be hard, and it's going to require some pretty ugly stuff. And I think
you don't need a top 5 pick this year.
You don't need a top. Sure. I mean, look, the draft, don't get me started on the draft and the crapshoot that is, right? Like, we can look at all these prospects and say, ooh, all these guys are 8 potential franchise players in this draft. But, if you're outside of the top 2 or 3, typically most years, you're not really picking in the star tier, or you're hoping you get a lucky case of development from someone outside of that upper range. And maybe that happens. Maybe it takes 3, 4, 5 years for that to happen. And you're already in Scottie Barnes' 8th, 9th season, and you have not really reached the heights you wanted to because you were waiting on some guy you took 6th or 7th overall to become the player you really wanted him to be. Like, I guess my sort of lack of belief in guarantees in the draft is what sort of puts me towards the star comes via a trade kind of thing. And I think, if you get the 13th pick in next year's draft because you made the play-in, that player can eventually be the avenue or one of the avenues by which you go and acquire your star down the line with, a handful of young players going out the door, the way the Raptors typically have did things a decade ago, right? Where they kind of had this shadow core they could then parlay into more when the time was right. I think it's just sort of a matter of preference and taste. I just think with the way the bottom of the league is shaping up, you're going to have to be real stinky to really get into that sort of range of, and look, if they end up with the 8th best odds, I think that's the perfect place to me. Between like 7th and 9th in the lottery odds, it's a flattened lottery world. If you end up with one of those picks, great. And you still have the chance to jump up. And it means you probably didn't pull the escape hatch until like mid-March to get there. That I can make my peace with, but the whole idea of it falling all apart if Jakob Poeltl rolls an ankle in week 1 of the season, that is what leaves me feeling very, very concerned about the sort of the competence we're going to see on the court. And maybe Yak stays healthy all year and things are fine, but he's a guy who's missed time. He's a guy who they went 4-28 without last season, and they didn't go and find a credible backup for him. That almost concerns me more than the lack of any sort of wing defender. And I think you can go into the season with the best intentions of we're going to be competent for 5 of the 6 months, and then we'll maybe sort of soft tank our way into the back part of the sort of top 10 or so. But I think you're really gambling on the health of your center, and if without him, you kind of don't have any foundational pillars to hold things up. And I think that is where my concern with this offseason comes in. But hey, I would love to be wrong, man. I would love for this just to be a competent, lovely, surprising, spunky. Ooh, they're developing nicely. And also they're going to get a nice pick type of team. That would be lovely. I just think it's hard to have your cake and eat it too in this situation. And I think there's a real downside for this just to be kind of a wasted season, and a wasted season with with your important players on second contracts. There's a toll to that. There is a tax to just not playing real basketball for long stretches and not getting the developmental reps that basically last season they got none of because of the constant turnover and uncertainty. You can't have another season like last year, I guess is my point.
We're going to find out. So the number that really everyone is, tied to is the barbecue net rating, right?
Right.
The net rating with Poeltl and Barrett and Quickley and Barnes was positive. They won their minutes.
Yep.
We're going to find out if that remains true. I think there's probably a pretty good chance that when healthy, this team is a 500 basketball team.
Sure.
A lot of teams that are 500 can handle a couple injuries. The Raptors cannot. But look, if Jakob Poeltl plays 30 games, the Raptors will have a whole lot of bigger issues than, like, I don't think that's something that a moderate backup center is going to be able to hold the cards up on out of.
Sure, that's fair.
And if Jakob Poeltl plays 60 games, I think they can survive that anyway. You know, I just think the edges are such that the Raptors are sort of seeing winning or losing as a win this season. And particularly when you look at Immanuel Quickley's contract, the flatness tells you when they want to contend.
Sure.
Like,
totally.
We'll pay you more money now when we're not ready. And when it becomes 17% of the cap in, what's that, in 4 years?
Yeah, the last season of the deal. Yeah.
Yeah. Then, well, that's when we have space to get that guy we want. And that's also, if they draft a star now, that perfect mix when he'll be ready to play and he'll still be on the last year of his rookie contract.
Sure.
Right. So I think the numbers are sort of indicating that the Raptors want to lose. I look, I know that you're on the far radical end of you got to play good basketball. And if you weren't the guy on the other end of this computer screen, I would be on the radical end. I'm okay with losing. I'm pretty against tanking early, and I want there to be, foundations to help development. You're just like far beyond that.
It's also an entertainment product, right? And I would
you
like to
want to have to talk about it. We want to talk about
miserable
good
watching
stuff.
the team for 6 months. Yeah, like that would be cool.
Yeah. That March was pretty rough. I think without a doubt, no matter what, whether they win or lose, try to tank, try to make the play in, we're not going to get a month like that again.
Here's hoping, man. Here's hoping. If we do, I'm bringing you on every day of said month and forcing you to talk about it with me. So
if we do, I'm having another baby so I can go on pat leave again.
Louis, this has been wonderful. We've run long, but I think it's justifiable considering how sort of big yesterday felt as like a page turning moment, if you will. So thank you for sitting here, talking through it with me, and putting up with my radical opinions on, again, competitive spirit and whatnot. Much appreciated as always. Do you have anything you want to promote for the good people out there?
No, nothing to promote. Sean, thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure. Radical conservatism. That would be your stance here.
Let's not say that. Let's not put those.
Not
words
political.
together.
Like about you want the team to be competent, right? That would be the
yeah. Let's say that instead. We'll leave it there, and we'll come back on tomorrow's show. Topic TBD. We'll figure it out. Maybe Katie Heine will be along. Maybe we'll do a little mailbag or something like that. Either way, lots of good stuff on tap this week. Jamar Hines will be along. We got a good pal Vivek Jacob back on Friday as well, and I going to try for next week to be our over-under spectacular take-up episode, and we'll see who won and all that good stuff. So lots to look forward to as we continue through July here. We'll stay daily through the rest of the month with a couple of days off here and there for vacation and whatnot. But either way, thank you so much for rocking with us. Follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend on your apps of choice, on YouTube, all that good stuff. And we will talk to you again on Wednesday for another episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks for hanging. Bye-bye. Rick.